Primrose, a little girl from China who was born with congenital glaucoma, found her earthly angels by chance, or to be exact, they found her, and they knew she was destined to be their daughter. A 5-year-old girl who was shunned as a monster has had her piercing silver eyes removed. Chris and Aaron Austin were drawn in by their daughter Primrose's striking eyes when they adopted her from an orphanage in China in 2016. Children screamed and ran away from Primrose, whose sight was impaired due to untreated childhood glaucoma. 8 months ago, Primrose began to experience eye pain so agonizing she would sweat profusely, cry for 16 hours a day, and refuse to eat. But incredibly, after the decision to remove her eyes, Primrose has shown dramatic improvements and walking again within 2 days. Mrs. Austin, 35, a full-time carer for her daughter, said, "It was like living in a constant nightmare, not knowing whether she'd be okay. Kids call her a monster and run away screaming and crying, but she is beautiful even with her eyes looking different." Mr. and Mrs. Austin from Beaufort in Georgia first saw a picture of Primrose in 2014 and brought her home 2 years later. They needed to teach her to sit up, hold her head, feed, and even understand what affection was. The couple were told by the orphanage that Primrose was potentially deaf and blind due to untreated congenital glaucoma. Symptoms of childhood glaucoma include enlarged eyes, cloudiness of the cornea, and sensitivity to light. Medics discovered that a rare 6p25 deletion syndrome had caused the congenital glaucoma, and that Primrose could only sense light. She also was found to have learning disabilities, a lack of muscle tone, and other problems. Mrs. Austin said, "We knew she had glaucoma and was possibly deaf, but she had a very rare genetic syndrome that wasn't discovered until later." Primrose had laser treatment to reduce the pressure building up behind her eyes and tubes put in her ears to help her hear more. But in August, she began to show worrying signs that baffled doctors. Mrs. Austin said, "We're talking about life or death for Primrose. She was severely and critically ill. Doctors tried to eliminate her source of pain one by one. We were at the point where they had worked through most of the causes. It was an excruciating experience for us all. She was drenched in sweat, her body was dealing with such intense pain, and her nervous system was going nuts. She was hurting herself by not eating or drinking. We had to force liquids into her mouth with a syringe to keep her hydrated." The period, which the family called the 76 days of crisis, ended in the removal of her eyes when an MRI scan revealed the extent of damage to the Primrose's eyes. Primrose had suffered a buildup of pressure and a retinal detachment in one eye while the other shrank to half its size, forcing surgeons to remove the optic tissue from both. Mrs. Austin said it was a heartbreaking decision to have her eyes removed, but was 100% the right thing to do. "We never imagined 2 weeks later how much she would have progressed. It was a miracle 2 days after she was standing up for the first time in months, smiling, and has made progress in other areas. It's like a whole new world is coming and it feels really good and positive. We think we'll see a lot of changes in her. Teaching the world she is worthy is the hardest part as we are a society obsessed with perfection. This month she'll undergo more work on her eyes as well as taking molds of her eye implants ready for painted lenses later this year. After the molds are taken of her eye sockets this month, she'll have painted shells that will include a pupil and colored iris. Now she's starting to communicate in a new and different way. She'll always have to approach life differently, but we have now removed the source of her pain. If she never really talks or speaks, we'll find other ways to communicate with her. We'll teach her sign language or figure something out. She has started to use her forefingers and thumb to pinch her snacks, which she couldn't do before, and suddenly is now sleeping through the night." Mr. and Mrs. Austin knew years before that they wanted to adopt a child and say it has been a beautiful and rich experience. They hope Primrose's biological parents can one day be at ease knowing their daughter is safe, happy, and in a loving home. Life changes could be hard for disabled kids. Stephen Hunnan, a clinical services director at Optical Express, said the girl has the experience of silver eyes due to changes in the outer window of the eye, known as the cornea. These changes are a result of her congenital glaucoma, a condition which leads to raised intraocular pressure. Staff are urgently trawling through those offering her a home, focusing at first on those who are already approved for adoption in the hope a home can be found for her soon. Thousands of people have thrown their support behind the search to find 3-year-old Grace a family in time for Christmas. Hundreds of people have contacted the adoption agency tasked with finding her a new home after the mirror revealed her plight. Emails have flooded into First for Adoption, offering her a forever home, and there have been messages of support from around the world. Staff are urgently trawling through those offering her a home, focusing on those who are already approved for adoption in the hope a home can be found for her soon. The answer phone at First for Adoption was already full when staff arrived today, and phone lines opened at 10 a.m. this morning and have already been deluged. In addition, the Mirror Facebook page had more than 1,000 comments in support of Grace, with some offering to give her a home. The story has been shared more than 23,000 times and read by more than 300,000 people on the Mirror website, and more still on the Birmingham Mail website. Typical messages include, "Oh, what a beautiful little girl. I have 2 boys who are my world and always wanted a little girl to love. I wouldn't know where to start with adoption, but would genuinely love to love her." And "Such a beautiful little lady. Myself and my partner haven't got any children and are unable to have children. I would love to offer this little girl a loving and supporting home." We've contacted First for Adoption to begin the process of getting registered, which seems to quite understandably lengthy. Thank you, Daily Mirror, for sharing this heartwarming story. Grace, 3, suffers from cerebral palsy and chronic lung disease and has been looking for an adoptive family since her birth, as her own mother is unable to look after her because of a brain injury caused by an accident. Despite being up for adoption, no one has come forward up until now, and so adoptive parents have taken the unusual step of making a public appeal for help finding her a new family. She's currently living with foster parents Jill and Paul in the Midlands, but needs a permanent home. Jill said, "It's overwhelming to see this kind of a response, but she's a beautiful little girl, and she'll be a gift to any family. All of our family have been so happy with the response, but I think it's put into perspective how hard it will be to lose her. She deserves a lovingly little family of her own, but we're going to miss her so much. We're all going to miss her so much, but we want to see her settled. It feels like reality now, but she is one of the longest children we have had, and it is hard, especially with Grace because she's been so poorly throughout her life, and I have had worked so hard with her. It's difficult to think about how we will cope without her. We have done what we can with Grace, and now she's getting older and she needs a home of her own." Children and Families Minister Edward Timpson, who grew up with 2 adopted brothers, said, "Like the hundreds and thousands of you who have read Grace's story, my heart immediately went out to the plight of this little girl. And what is sobering is the fact that Grace's situation isn't unique. There are thousands of Graces across the country, vulnerable children awaiting adoption who are crying out for a loving, stable home." Gemma Gordon-Johnson, head of services at First for Adoption, said, "Since Grace's story appeared online last night, First for Adoption has received hundreds of emails, tweets, and phone messages. People from all over the UK have contacted us to offer Grace a home, and we're thrilled. Our team of trained advisors will be handling inquiries to the First for Adoption information line, and will be prioritizing approved adopters who are able to provide the round-the-clock care that Grace needs. To be refused by the society where you're born may destroy, but always there a hope for everyone." Luca Trapanese was a single man who was looking to adopt. He first met his daughter Alba when she was just a few days old, and was put up for adoption because she has Down syndrome. She had sadly already been rejected by over 20 families who simply couldn't handle raising a child with disabilities. Luca was different. Ever since he was 14 years old, he had worked with various social service organizations, including one that specializes in providing assistance to children with Down syndrome. He also just wanted to become a father more than anything. "I wanted to become a father to sow my knowledge, my love, my affection in another creature. Currently, I've forgotten that Alba has been adopted, and for me, it is not a foreign body," he says. Luca opens up about his experience with Alba to Concoli Bimbi Journal. "A disabled child is not a second choice, but a conscious choice with respect to my vocation and my abilities," he says. "Since I was 14, I volunteered and worked with people with disabilities, so I thought I had the right tools to do it. After the separation with my partner, it was the option that prevailed for me, so I made a request in the special register that allows singles to adopt in special conditions. Of course, the adoption process didn't come without difficulties. Adoption centers are usually in favor of traditional 2-parent homes for children to be raised in. Where he's from, in Italy, single parents were not allowed to adopt until things changed in 2017. The special circumstances for Luca were interesting, though. They told me that they would only give me a children with illnesses, severe disabilities, or behavioral problems, a child who had been rejected by all traditional families," he says. Still, he was overjoyed and thankful that his personal experience with disabled children allowed for him to adopt. That's when the adoption center calls Luca and tells him about a baby girl who is 13 days old with Down syndrome. Nobody wanted her because of her disabilities. Luca said yes, immediately. "When I held her in my arms, I was filled with joy. I felt that she was my daughter immediately. I knew I was ready to be her father," Luca recalls. Now, Alba is nearing 6 years old and loving life. She has a very strong personality and can be very stubborn at times. She likes to play and dance all day. Luca reveals about his daughter. "Now I see a future for myself. I will spend the rest of my life with a girl I love, and will do many wonderful things together."